Before introducing my parents to my girlfriend for the very first time, I gently asked her to dress modestly for the occasion. Her response was immediate and sharp. "Don't be weird. I can wear whatever I want. I'm not your property." That night, after the dinner had ended, and the tension had settled like dust in the air, my parents pulled me aside and spoke a single sentence, one that would alter the course of my life forever. It's astonishing how you can spend an entire year with someone, convinced you're laying the groundwork for a shared future, only to have it all collapse in a single, quiet moment over a dinner table. My unraveling began on a Saturday evening, the night Megan, my girlfriend of a year, was finally meeting my parents. I wasn't nervous in the conventional sense, but I was acutely aware that my world and hers were fundamentally different, and that this dinner would be the test of whether those two worlds could ever peacefully coexist. My parents are simple people, not in a limiting way, but in the most admirable sense. My father dedicated 40 years of his life to carpentry, a master craftsman whose word was as binding as any legal contract, and whose handshake carried more weight than a signature. My mother spent her career as a nurse, compassionate and steady, the kind of person who quietly mends both wounds and spirits. They are kind, grounded, and deeply rooted in tradition. They believe in respect, humility, and the quiet dignity that comes from living a life of integrity. Their home has always been a sanctuary, a place of peace, not performance, where loud arguments and ostentatious displays have no place. Megan, on the other hand, was anything but calm. She was a whirlwind, a self-styled lifestyle influencer, whose entire existence seemed choreographed for an invisible audience scrolling through their phones. Our relationship had been a constant tug-of-war between my private, introspective life and her loud, curated public persona. I stayed with her because I believed I loved her, and because I clung to the hope that the version of her I saw when the camera was off was the real one. I was wrong. Tragically, completely wrong. The week before the dinner, I broached the subject of what she might wear. I knew it was a delicate matter. I'd seen how quickly she could interpret even the gentlest suggestion as an attack on her autonomy. So I chose my words carefully. One evening, as she scrolled through an online boutique on her laptop, I said softly, "Hey, I've been thinking about Saturday. My parents are really simple, old-fashioned people. Remember that blue dress you wore to my company dinner last year? You looked amazing in it. Something like that would be perfect." It was a request wrapped in a compliment, a low-stakes, reasonable ask meant to help her make a good impression. Her reaction was anything but reasonable. She snapped her laptop shut, her eyes flashing with that familiar mix of defensiveness and indignation. "Are you serious right now?" she shot back. "You're trying to tell me what to wear?" "No, Megan," I replied, keeping my voice level. "I'm just giving you a heads up. First impressions matter a lot to them. I want them to see you, not just your outfit." "They'll see me," she retorted, standing up abruptly. "They'll see all of me. I'm not going to shrink myself or dress like some prudish librarian just to please your backward parents. Don't be weird. I can wear what I want. I am not your property." And just like that, she had transformed a respectful, considerate suggestion into a full-blown ideological battle. A feminist stand against what she perceived as patriarchal control. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I simply felt a deep, sinking disappointment settle in my chest. In that moment, I knew the weekend would be a disaster. She arrived at my apartment on Saturday night, dressed not for a family dinner, but for a declaration of war. Her outfit was a tight, black, leather-like dress, with a neckline plunging nearly to her navel, and a thigh-high slit that left little to the imagination. It was the kind of dress meant for a nightclub, Not for a quiet evening in my parents' modest, warm home. "What do you think?" she asked, her eyes daring me to object. I said nothing. I just grabbed my jacket and walked out the door. The dinner that followed was one of the most excruciating experiences of my life. The moment we stepped into my childhood home, the atmosphere shifted, subtly, but unmistakably. My mother, who is normally the embodiment of warmth and hospitality, froze for just a fraction of a second when she saw Megan's outfit. But she recovered instantly, her practiced, polite smile sliding into place like armor. My father gave a slow, deliberate nod, his expression unreadable, but his silence louder than any words. They didn't comment on her attire. They were too gracious for that. But their disapproval hung in the air like a heavy, invisible guest at the table. Megan felt it, and instead of softening, she doubled down. She became louder, more obnoxious, dominating the conversation with stories about influencer galas, brand deals, and the petty dramas of her social circle. She kept pulling out her phone, snapping selfies mid-meal, completely oblivious to the quiet horror on my mother's face. At one point, she scrolled through her Instagram feed and let out a sharp, mocking laugh. "Oh my God, you guys have to see this," she said, turning her phone toward us. "Look at her outfit. So desperate. She's trying way too hard to be edgy." That's when my father spoke quietly, firmly, and with finality. "We have a rule in this house, Megan," he said. "We don't speak ill of others at our dinner table." Megan stared at him, stunned. It was clear no one had ever set a boundary like that for her before. She let out a short, ugly laugh, rolled her eyes, and went right back to her phone. I spent the rest of the evening in a state of quiet, simmering fury. She wasn't just disrespecting me anymore. She was openly, brazenly disrespecting my parents in their own home. She wasn't a guest. She was a performer, using their kindness as a stage for her own self-aggrandizement. The drive back to our apartment was silent. She was furious at my parents, at their judgmental attitudes, at their rudeness. I was too disgusted to speak. I dropped her off and told her I was going back to help my parents clean up. She scoffed and slammed the car door. When I returned to their house, the polite pretense was gone. My mother stood at the sink, scrubbing a pot with more force than necessary, her back to me. My father sat in his armchair, gazing into the cold fireplace. I started to apologize. "Mom, Dad, I'm so sorry about tonight. I had no idea she'd—" My father raised a hand, cutting me off. He and my mother led me into the den, away from the clatter of the kitchen, and then he said the words that changed everything. "Son, you don't build a life with a woman who looks at your family and sees an audience instead of a home." It wasn't an ultimatum. It wasn't a command. It was a quiet, devastating truth. So clear, so precise, it sliced through every excuse I'd been clinging to. She hadn't come to meet my family. She'd come to perform for them, to conquer them, to fold them into the endless narcissistic narrative of her curated life. In that moment, I knew. The relationship wasn't just strained. It was fundamentally incompatible with everything I valued. My loyalty no longer belonged to her. It belonged to the principles my parents had instilled in me: respect, humility, and the quiet strength of genuine connection. I didn't break up with her that night. That would have been too dramatic, too emotional, exactly the kind of messy confrontation she would have used to paint me as controlling or unstable. No, my response had to mirror the very values she'd mocked: quiet, deliberate, and unshakable. So I returned to our apartment and said nothing, and for the next month I became a ghost in my own life. I stopped being her boyfriend. I became a polite, distant roommate who happened to share a bed. The first thing I withdrew was financial support. We had a joint credit card for household expenses. but she'd turned it into her personal slush fund-buying clothes, paying for overpriced brunches, and purchasing the endless stream of products she promoted online. I called the credit card company and reported her card as lost. When she came to me days later, frustrated that it had been declined, I simply said, "That's weird. You should call the company and sort it out." I didn't offer to help. I went back to reading my book. For the first time, she had to navigate bureaucracy on her own. Next, I stopped participating in her online persona. I'd always been her reluctant photographer, holding her phone at the perfect angle, taking dozens of shots until she got the effortless image she wanted. The weekend after the dinner, she came to me in a new outfit, phone in hand. "Babe, can you take some pictures? The lighting's perfect." "Sorry," I said without looking up from my laptop. "I'm busy with work." "But it'll only take a minute. I need to post this." "You're a creative person, Megan," I replied flatly. "I'm sure you'll figure it out." She spent the next hour fumbling with a selfie stick, growing more frustrated with every failed attempt. The illusion of effortless perfection she sold to the world, I made her earn it alone. Then I withdrew socially. I stopped attending her influencer events. I stopped dining with her friends, whom I'd long found shallow and exhausting. I reconnected with my own circle friends I'd neglected because Megan deemed them boring. She confronted me weeks into this silent retreat. "What's wrong with you?" she demanded. "You're acting so weird." "You're distant. You're not helping me. Is this still about that stupid dinner?" "I'm just reassessing my priorities, Megan," I said calmly. "And I'm not one of them?" she asked, her voice dripping with self-pity. "You made your priorities very clear that night," I replied. "Yourself, your image, your absolute right to do whatever you want, no matter who it hurts. I'm just taking a page from your book. I'm prioritizing myself." The final blow came in the form of a real estate listing. Our lease was ending in 2 months, and we'd been casually discussing buying a house, though I would have been the one financing it entirely. One evening, she walked in to find me studying blueprints at the dining table. "What's that?" she asked, hope flickering in her eyes. "The plans for my new house," I said. "Our new house, you mean?" I looked at her, then really looked, and said, "No, mine. I'm not renewing the lease. I'll be moving into my new place next month. You'll need to find somewhere else to live." The reality hit her like a physical blow. This wasn't a fight. It wasn't a phase. It was an eviction, emotional, financial, and logistical. She had no real job, no savings, and now, no home. The meltdown was spectacular. She cried. She screamed. She begged. She promised to change, to apologize to my parents, to wear whatever I wanted. But it was all performance. The last gasp of someone trying to reclaim a life she'd carelessly thrown away. I didn't flinch. I'd spent a month detaching, and her tears no longer moved me. I told her calmly that the decision was final, and that she had 30 days to leave. Even her parents offered no rescue. After I'd spoken privately with her father, explaining exactly what had happened at the dinner and why I was ending things, they were too ashamed to intervene. Her attempts to turn our mutual friends against me also failed. Everyone had heard about her behavior that night. Her victim narrative found no audience. In the end, she did the one thing she'd spent her adult life avoiding. She went home. She packed her designer bags and moved back into her childhood bedroom, a 30-year-old woman with a failed influencer career, no prospects, and nowhere else to go. It's been a year now. I live in the house I designed and helped build a place of calm, order, and quiet contentment. My parents come over every Sunday for dinner. A few months ago, I started dating again. Her name is Rachel. She's a teacher kind, grounded, and genuinely curious about the world. When she met my parents for the first time, she wore a simple, elegant dress and spent the entire evening asking my dad about his woodworking projects and my mom about her garden. She didn't see an audience. She saw a family, and she became part of it. I saw Megan a few weeks ago. I was at a coffee shop with Rachel, laughing over something she'd said, when Megan walked in with her old circle of enablers. She looked tired, older than her years, her smile brittle and forced. She saw me. She saw Rachel beautiful, confident, looking at me with real affection. She saw the life she'd been offered, the life she'd dismissed as dull and outdated. For just a second, her mask slipped. In that fleeting moment, I saw pure, unfiltered regret. Then she turned and walked out without ordering. My parents' words that night didn't just change my mind. They changed my entire trajectory. They gave me the clarity to see that I wasn't merely dating a difficult woman. I was trying to build a future with someone whose core values were diametrically opposed to my own. And you cannot construct a lasting life on a foundation that is fundamentally flawed. Megan got what she wanted, to be the star of her own show. But as it turns out, even the brightest spotlight feels cold and empty when there's no one left in the audience.